Hello and welcome to the Nordic Mythology Podcast. I'm Daniel Farron, co-owner of the company Horns of Odin, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Matthias Nordvig.
Hello, everyone. This time we have, for me at least, a local legend of Denmark, Colin Dale of the Kunsten på kroppen, the art on the body tattoo studio. One of the OGs of Viking and prehistoric tattoos. I think anybody in Denmark knows your designs and your art. So, Colin, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Not everybody
So
gets.
I start out. I'm not at Kunsten Kroppen anymore. That's where I started.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. Kai's. You were talking with him a few episodes back, and he's taken it over after Eric retired. He came up and sort of took my spot when I started my own studio, Skin and Bone, about 10 years ago.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Skin and Bone. Yeah, sorry. No, I'm just like used to associating you with Kunsten på kroppen. So
yeah. Well, that was your time when you were living here. So
yeah,
I mean, you're only 10 years out there. It's not much.
Yeah.
So I mean, Colin, that's quite the introduction from Matthias. Not everybody gets one quite that nice.
Thank you.
So I mean, you are kind of one of the like he says, the OGs, the legends of the Nordic tattooing world.
I'm just older than everyone else.
So when did you start? Well, let's go right back to the beginning.
Start. Yeah, that's really hard to pinpoint. Start is
Well, did you
working
did
with
you
tattooing?
Well, that's what I was about to ask. Did you train in like other forms and then come into kind of like the Nordic style after, or was that always where you wanted to go?
Well, I was always interested in tattooing and cultural art. And I was taking a university degree in fine art, and started going and taking classes in indigenous art, and started falling across a lot of these traditional tattoo designs that you see when you study indigenous art, and that interested me, especially the Japanese and the Native American, the Inuit, and and when I finished my my art degree, I had somebody that offered to give me an apprenticeship, but instead I went traveling, and I just sort of never came back. So then there was sort of a lull. I spent. I was still interested in it, and when I finally settled in Denmark, I tried to get started over here, find a place to apprentice. I didn't want to just learn on my own, but it took many years because at that time there wasn't so many tattoo studios as there is now, and if you didn't know somebody, then it was hard to get into the business. They'd usually take somebody that they knew before they took somebody just off the street. So it took me about 5 years or so before I finally found a place that would take me in. And then it was just sort of by default. He was losing Eric. He was losing the girl who was working there, and I just sort of happened along at the right time.
That's usually the case. It's kind of the right place, right time, and that's that. I mean, it seems to be a really common occurrence of people who are studying artwork end up in tattooing. And I don't know if that's maybe there isn't that much money in art.
No, there wasn't much money in tattooing at that time either. You got to realize this is back in the 80s, 90s, and there wasn't the big boom that you have now. Just in the last 20 years, there's probably 5 times as many tattooists as there was 20 years ago. It's just been insane. It's just exploded.
So,
Yeah.
do you see that as a good do you see that as a good thing, or I mean, do you kind of like see as a positive that the tattooing's getting bigger and there's more people accepting it?
It's been good for business. I'm just not always sure if it's good for tattooing. The craft itself, because now you also get a whole influx of a lot of people wanting to get into tattooing that maybe wouldn't have even considered it before. When I got into tattooing, it was because I thought tattooing was really cool. Nowadays, you find a lot of people wanting to get into tattooing because they want to be cool.
Yeah, and I guess the money always helps, doesn't it? People.
Yeah, but at that time there wasn't the money. We'd have to save up during the summer months, go and work really hard, save up the money, and then in the winter you'd have weeks, months without too much work. Over Christmas and stuff, you'd be going for a couple weeks and not even have an appointment. So you'd sort of save up for the winter, sort of like the grasshopper. Well, act like the ant, not the grasshopper.
Yeah, I bet you miss those times now, though, because I imagine you don't get too many quiet spells.
No, but it's all good. I think it's been nice that tattooing has been more open to the public. More people are getting interested in it, and it's also opened up a lot of areas, especially with cultural tattooing, that maybe wouldn't have been open before. Like I said, like 10, 20 years ago, there was only like Eric and me going and doing and Jorn over in Aarhus doing Nordic designs. And other than that, there wasn't really anyone. But now just in Copenhagen, you get like 4 or 5 studios specializing just in Nordic design. So people are getting interested in the culture, and it's expanding. And it's not just the Nordic culture; it's also many other cultures, Polynesian culture and Borneo, and everybody's getting into their roots now, which just wasn't happening before. So it's really good thing to see.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of in a Danish context, Inuit getting like traditional tattoos now. In Greenland, I think that's really awesome. The revival of Inuit tattooing.
Yeah, it's nice to see because I was playing around with it a bit because with my studies in Canada and more indigenous type of tattooing, I got interested in that as well. And then when I started tattooing, I became interested in the techniques, the different hand tattooing techniques as well, from different cultures, especially the cultures where it sort of died out. My interest was more from a archaeological side, more through a lot of the mummies and stuff like that. So I sort of tried to go and take that and bring it over into the Nordic, because we'd lost sort of everything that we had. We had no idea of what the tattoos were here in the north. We have no idea what the tools were used. So we have to go and look at other indigenous cultures to go and get some hints and start going and rebuilding our own culture.
So you're on board with when I say that the Vikings did tattoo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out my mouth there.
It'd be silly to say that they didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, they think a few people going and getting confused now, because now you have a lot of people going and getting Nordic tattoos, but their inspiration has been from a lot of pop culture now. So it's a lot of the Viking series, and a lot from the Avengers, and How to Train Your Dragon, and all of these programs.
Yeah, I've seen a few Ragnar tattoos on the side of the head.
Yeah. Everybody's getting those now.
That's always quite a common one.
But it's good that people are getting inspired. So yeah, you can't really take anything away from that.
No, absolutely not. I mean,
but time, it's nice to if they start going and looking more towards the cultural designs as well, rather than stuff that's like made up fantasy designs.
And the cultural ones are always, in my opinion anyway, so much more beautiful than anything that you see on the fantasy side of things. Anyway, so I don't know whether it's that some people don't know the right avenues of the cultural side to, where to look and who to find and the right tattoo artist to contact. So, or whether it's just maybe some people are lazy and they go for the first, because that's the other thing. People want things now, and they see something and it's like, I want that now, and they don't want to wait. Like especially Sean Parry's done quite a lot of my work, and you've got to wait a while. You don't just turn up and walk in, and I assume that's probably the same with you, Colin. You've got a little bit of a waiting list, but if when something's going on your skin for forever, it's worth waiting for.
Yeah.
So I mean,
did I ever tell you about the couple of emails that I've been, I get emails from people who, once in a while get a tattoo of some runes, and then they decide to email an expert and ask you, do you know what this says?
Well, these are the stories I've been waiting.
One of my favorite ones is there's one on Pinterest that everybody's getting because it includes everything. You got Yggdrasil. You have the ravens.
I know exactly the one you mean.
You have the compass. You have the compass, and you have the Old Nordic ruins that are going and writing an English text of Tolkien, and it just tries to cram everything into one little design, but it's so many different styles. So yeah.
You'll know the one if you see it, Matthias. It's
you have to show me, man.
It's quite. I guess it's almost quite 90s Celtic looking in design as well. I know I know the one that you're meaning, and that's the one that I see pop up on Facebook groups time and time again.
The problem is people are so used to this, like instant gratification and being able to find everything on the net. And a lot of times they'll go and like Google, like Nordic tattoo, Nordic dragon tattoo, Nordic this tattoo, Nordic that tattoo. But just if they would just drop the tattoo on their search, just write like Nordic dragons, and then try to go and find some of the original designs and build something off of that. But every time they go and like put tattoo, then it ends up going to the same 10 designs on Pinterest that everybody else has.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. Actually, my old tattooist gave me that when I was looking for I've got a wolf on my ribs, and he was like, "Don't look for wolf tattoo designs. Look for pictures of wolves. Like I'd much rather look at take my design from a wolf than try and copy someone else's tattoo." And as soon as he said it, was like, that really makes sense. Why did I not just think of that on my own?
Actually, my tattoos are my own designs largely, like stuff that I've been drawing myself and then taken to a tattoo artist, and then he's like been working with it.
Yeah, that's a nice
what
way.
I like. People like I don't like to start with just a blank slate. I like them to come with an idea, sometimes a sketch. It doesn't have to be good. It can be like an absolute shit drawing that Colin did. But if it gives me inspiration, then it makes my job easier.
Absolutely. So, Matthias, I'm going to have to pull you back because I've been waiting 30 episodes of this podcast for you to tell me the stories about people who must message you with bad tattoos of what runes say. I mean, you don't have to name any names, but you must have some good examples of some that are just a nightmare. And you probably do have as well, to be honest, Colin.
So, I mean, I get, I've gotten like a handful of emails from people that sent me a picture of a tattoo that they got, and they're asking like, "Oh, do you know what this says?" And in most cases, it's just gibberish. It's like there was one email, and they had gotten like a Ragnar style tattoo, like on the side of their head.
The head as well.
Yeah. And it was just like, bro. It didn't say anything at all.
So do you reply politely explaining that, or do you just
dude,
just
I'm
not
a business
reply?
caller. I don't have time to reply to emails like that, unfortunately.
I mean,
also, I don't know. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here. Like,
and then unfortunately, people also they'll as long as they're happy with it, then it's a good tattoo. Because if you criticize it, you are not just criticizing the tattoo, you're also criticizing the person, because they can't get rid of this. It's on their, so it's like a personal attack, and they'll defend themselves to the death. This real shit tattoo, they'll defend it.
Yeah. I mean, you've really got to, haven't you? Really, when it's
even though they know it's shit themselves. But, yeah.
Well, this actually, it, man. Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of a friend of mine who recently had a tattoo, and he's got like, it's a really beautiful bird piece on his neck. And then a couple of months later, the tattoo artist had come out that he'd been sort of sexually inappropriate with some of his clients, and so the tattoo artist had then kind of been blacklisted and sort of cancelled and shamed. But another mate of mine asked my friend, was like, do you think people will look at that and recognize his work and look badly on it? And he got really defensive. Obviously, why the fuck would you say that? This is on, it's on my neck. So it's that kind of line is once, if something happens in the future, does that work still kind of relate to them? It's a weird one.
Like getting a portrait of Gary Glitter or something back in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. I think we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago about, like different, in music bands, like, if someone does something wrong, does that mean you can't listen to their entire catalogue of music? But especially when there's other members in the band, it's kind of, it's a tough one, but equally you can't go listening to Gary Glitter with the windows down, driving down the street. So that's not really acceptable.
Well, I mean, it's from the scholarly perspective. Actually, we tend to say that the artwork speaks for itself. It stands alone. Once it has been created, it has also been released from the hands of the artist, and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the artist. That's a typical approach to especially literature. Don't read biographies into a literary text that has been written by somebody, right? So I think to some extent you could at least say that there's part of the artwork.
Especially with tattoos, it's on the person's body. It's them that owns it. So
that, I mean, it's funny that you say that, because I remember a few years ago there was I can't remember if it was FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer. It was one of the kind of football video games, and they wanted to do, because obviously they get very lifelike now, they wanted to put the tattoos of the player on the character within the game. And the tattoo artist ended up suing the game, saying that it was his artwork, even though it was on the football player's body. He was like, well,
and same with the Mike Tyson tattoo in the Hangover movie as well.
Yeah. So I always wondered how that kind of worked, because I would be under your kind of line of thinking, is that once it's on their body, it's kind of their property. They can do what they want with it.
If the artwork is taken from that person and then used to promote something else, like there was also a football player that had his tattoos that were used by a perfume company because he was sponsoring the perfume, but then they were using the tattoos on the packaging. Now, without paying the tattooist. So that's sort of, that's sort of mass production of an artist, which, I don't agree with.
Okay.
I think the artist then should be paid if it's mass produced in that way, or used for promotion in that way. If the guy's just running around the field and giving interviews, it's no problem. But as soon as some other entity, some other company takes that image and start choosing it for themselves, then it's sort of an infringement, I think.
Oh, yeah, I never really thought of it that way either. So I guess it's a really murky area.
I
And
think
I'm sure that,
to me, it's a pretty straightforward case. If they are using, the print or parts of the print, I mean, then it is some kind of copyright infringement.
Yeah.
I guess how I always looked at it was that if I assume that the player would have given consent for them to use. I imagine so anyway, that the player would have consented for them to use it. So it's kind of like, well, is it because it's on their body? Is it their choice? But who knows? Who knows? But I certainly, yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from with the it being mass produced.
Yeah. Especially you see a lot of tattooist art ends up getting stolen, and people getting copies of other people's tattoos. That you can't really do anything about, because it's a personal thing, and yeah, it's one person wearing this, or copying this. Maybe they're doing like a woodworking piece off of somebody's tattoo, or they're doing like a piece of embroidery off of somebody's tattoo design. That's sort of a personal thing. Now that's fine, It's the same thing if people get a Disney tattoo. Disney isn't going to go and come and sue them for having a Disney tattoo.
No.
But if you start mass producing it, going and taking like Disney, or taking somebody's tattoo and going and like making jewelry or making T-shirts of it, then I think that the artist should get compensation for that, because they've done the design. And these people are going and taking the design and making money off of it.
Absolutely. I mean, what that always reminds me of. So Brock, who we had on here, the sort of Badger King tattoo.
Yeah.
So he's a friend of mine, and he has a piece that he drew. He drew a long time ago, and he's like it's an axe head figure with like a face on it, but on the handle of the axe, it's got his name in like a bind rune.
Yeah.
And that's one that pops up every now and then, that somebody's got it tattooed. I think it might have even been on your Facebook group the other day. Like somebody got it.
That's going up there. I can't remember if somebody got it as a tattoo, or if somebody was posting it that they want this. I think somebody got it as a tattoo.
I think the last one I saw, somebody got it as a tattoo, and somebody asked them what the rune means, and they were like, "Oh no, it's just something personal to me." And I think Brock was like, "No, actually, I fucking drew that. That's my name."
I remember I saw it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you must.
We opened that can of worm. Your Facebook page. I want to hear more.
Oh boy.
I mean,
at that all right. I started this page just for fun. We were coming up to the summer, and we've had I go to the Viking markets. I've been doing like Viking markets and experimental archaeology out at Lyra, doing the Viking markets for the last 20 years or more. And the last several years, there's been an influx of a lot of craftsmen who think that they can tattoo. So a lot of amateurs popping up on the markets going and tattooing, and really bad work, sometimes very unhygienic work. And it's gotten to the point that the amateurs outnumber the professionals on the markets. So they've actually been thinking about shutting down tattooing on the markets, which would mean all the professional tattooists wouldn't be allowed, but the amateurs would still be there.
Yeah,
because the amateurs are there because they're a blacksmith, or they're a weaver or something, and they do a little tattooing on the side in their tent for fun on their. But we're the ones that suffer for it.
That's so typical Danish, man.
And anyway, I started this site just because this traditional Nordic tattoo site on Facebook, because of this. We were coming up to the summer, and they were threatening to close us down, and I wanted to go and like show some good tattoos, because there's also, because of all these bad tattooists, there's also been a lot of bad tattoos, and these Vikings, they will again defend it, saying that yeah, it's supposed to look rough. It's done by hand. Yeah, it's not Viking if it doesn't look a little, you know.
That's kind of like the I always, especially because we sell clothing, you always kind of get, oh, do you do Viking sizes? And they mean like triple XL, like quadruple XL, and I'm like, like what? Like, where's
Viking sizes?
yeah, that you know,
The Vikings are 5'6".
that's what I mean. Like honestly, for the amount of times I've heard that, do you know, or especially we all sometimes you get it if like if you stop at a double XL. And it's like, well, why don't you do things in Viking sizes? You're a Viking company, and it's like, I don't think the Vikings were a triple XL. I'm sorry, and I don't want to upset anybody by saying that, but it's kind of like I find it a really weird thing for people to say, almost kind of like justifying. And that's what made me think of like the way you were saying with the tattoos. You know, they're meant to be rough, and it's like, you know, I've got some hand poked tattoos, and the lines are pretty straight.
Yeah, it's problem is you had what was it? Well, yeah, the Viking program. I think I haven't seen the series yet, but supposedly there's Bjorn Ironside. He goes on some quest out into the forest and he tattoos himself or something, and everyone figures that they got to go and do it themselves now, or they got to have a friend do it, or it's a real ritual type of thing, and that's all fine. That's how tattooing started. People just going and like poking each other and shit, and even when you were kids, going and doing with your mates and in your parents' basement. And
see,
stuff.
this is exactly my argument for why the Vikings definitely must have tattooed. Like kids in basements do it, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, there's a joke in there with you talking about Vikings going to the woods poking each other, relating back to our episode a few weeks ago, and I cannot let that one. I was sat here for like a good 30 seconds thinking, shall I bring that one back up? And I couldn't let it go. I just couldn't.
Leave the bottoms alone.
So,
but this site I started was sort of in retaliation for that, because we were coming up to the market, so I wanted to show some good work, and I opened it up and put out some of my stuff and some of my friends' stuff to do good work, just to show what can be done with hand tools, and that it doesn't have to be rough. It can be just as clean as machine. It just takes a little longer, and yeah, So it started off very slow, and then eventually worked up and got about after a year or so, got about 5,000 members, and then it crawled up to 7, and then boom, it just exploded, and now we're at
54.
50 some thousand followers now, and like that's the problem, because you get like you got 100 times as many followers as you have actually tattooists on the site now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're struggling to go and also working by hand. Things go a lot slower, so we maybe don't have a tattoo to show every day. We maybe don't have a tattoo to show every week. We may be working on the same thing for a month and can finally go and show it. Mm-hmm. But we've opened it up. Like, I've kept it very open, because otherwise we'd only be able to show like a couple tattoos a week. But I also allow people to add historical designs. Like if they find a Thor's hammer or something, or a ruined stone they like, they can add that. They can do personal artwork and show that. But the tattoos themselves have to be done 100% by hand.
Okay.
So as opposed to you find many other there are quite a few other Nordic tattoo sites out there by machine, but I think this is the only one that actually just specializes in handwork. So quite proud of that, and quite proud of the how popular it's been, but for good and bad.
That's what I was about to say. I mean, how do you find managing that? Because I've said a few times on here that I like to look in the different Facebook groups, and some of those, some of the posts, the comment sections can get a little bit wild.
Yeah, and they get wild really fucking quick.
Yeah.
It's insane. I can, because I've closed it off. I don't because I have to see the work before I let it in, because often people are posting really bad hand pokes that they've done on their boyfriend.
Yeah.
I did this little ruin on his finger and shit, and that's not what the site is for. And also a lot of people going and doing like really nice Nordic stuff, but with machine.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of have to filter out everything. So in that way, I'm able to keep a little bit control of it. Only things that I allow to go through. But every once in a while, just something just really sparks, and I'll go and let something through, and not even really think about it. And then I'll go to work, and I tattoo for a living.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like at the studio like for 8-9 hours a day, and I don't have a smartphone or anything like that. So when I get home in the evening, and after dinner, and after I get the kid to bed, and I might go and like check my mails, and then go and look in at the Facebook, and there has maybe been some shitstorm raging for like 9 hours, and people giving death threats, and just saying the most horrible things to each other. You feel. I've commented one time, and that also got. I just felt like a babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
You have to watch these kids all the fucking time. And I commented on that, and then suddenly I got a shitstorm about me calling all of these people like babies.
You can't win.
Can't win.
Well, I mean, when you've got like say 54,000 people there, there's going to be somebody upset by everything, unfortunately.
Well, I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing. The group is so big, and such a variety of different people that are into watching the group for different things, because you get a lot of pagans, you get a lot of people that are into Nordic reenactment, you get people that are into cultural tattoos, and from different countries as well. So yeah, sometimes you'll see maybe somebody from the Baltic countries will go and post a pattern that has maybe swastika patterns in it. And then one of the followers from Germany will be really upset about these swastika patterns in this design. And yeah, the pagans, if suddenly you post something that's Christian, then like either it's Coptic or Croatian or Viking Christian, the pagans will go nuts about that, and yeah. But yeah, like I said, if we didn't have the group open, like it's open to a lot of different things as well. It's basically northern Europe. So we also have designs from the Pazruk mummies, and like I said, the Croatian Coptic tattoos and stuff as well. Celtic, Pictish, all of this stuff is allowed.
Yeah. So,
but then you get some people that think that it's only supposed to be Nordic.
Yeah.
And if you use like one of the Icelandic steos, then they'll go nuts because they say that it's fucking Jewish or something.
Can I just borrow the soapbox for a moment here? Because now I'm going to say things. Okay. So, well,
I'm going to sit back in my chair.
Yeah, just like lean back tight. Okay. So we got that shitstorm because we posted that Vikings are gay podcast, and it was a great podcast. Amy said a lot of awesome things, and then you have a bunch of people who all of a sudden give us ratings for being leftist and all that stuff. And here's what I want to say about all of that, and people who get pissy about Christian symbols or other cultures being involved in your site as well. those of you out there who want to bitch about that, you don't own this culture. It's not yours, guys. It's like this is a culture, and what culture means is something that's shared between a lot of human beings. There are some who produce aspects of this culture. Colin, you're producing, Nordic tattoos, right? And this is a modern culture where you are working with designs that are based off of traditional patterns, things you find on rune stones and in a lot of other archaeological contexts, right? And then you borrow aspects from other cultures, for instance, the methods with which you apply that to people's skin. To create a modern tradition, which is perfectly fine, right? And cultures are never a closed-off systems. There's no culture that's an island, not even island cultures. They always interact with other cultures in different ways, borrow and exchange and give something off and receive something from other cultures. That is also a fact. And I simply cannot at all stand when people try to tell other people how they should work with their own culture, the culture that they associate with and live with. And that's the one thing that I'm really that was my soapbox moment, guys. Don't call me a leftist, because
you have it a few times on ours as well, where somebody that maybe had too dark skin got a Nordic design, or somebody asking if it's okay to get a Nordic design when they aren't from like the north. And every once in a while you get some idiot that goes and steps up and says, yeah, you should stick to your own, and this is our culture, and cultural appropriation, and all this shit.
How boring would the world be if everyone just stuck to their own quote unquote? Like, it would just be so dull, and it's there to be enjoyed by everybody else.
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah, that was one of the things we were just talking about, because we had a girl that went and just posted. She was it was a tattooist I knew who's Native American, and she tattooed a rune on another girl who's also partially Native American, and I allowed it on. And somebody from I think it was from Germany, I think it was Germany this time, went and made a comment about how you should drink from your own well. And I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, because, with Google Translate and I always want to make sure first, it could have just been a joke or something. So I went and sort of asked him to explain what he meant by that expression. And then I went to work, and lo and behold, when I got home, it had just gone viral. And it had gotten so bad. This one little comment had gotten so bad. Because it wasn't just his comment; it was everyone attacking him about his comment as well. So he wasn't the only one to blame. By the time this thing got totally out of hand, you weren't sure if you were supposed to throw out like this guy that's sort of white supremacist, or if you should throw out the pagans, or if you should throw out somebody else that's commenting on this, because they're all going and yelling at each other and saying the most horrible things.
Yeah.
And at that point, not one is better than the other.
It just gets a little bit insane. And I think also people sometimes need to remember that, like, you manage this page for free. You don't do it because you get paid for it. You do it because it's the love of hand poke tattoos. Traditional hand tattoos.
It was just the good work.
That's it.
Show that it can be done well.
So you spend hours, and you've invested hours of your own time into this, into this platform. And I think people sometimes just forget that you don't owe anybody anything. It's you've done it off your own back. And it's kind of the same with the podcast. Sometimes I get a little bit defensive because me and Matthias, we give up a lot of our own personal time to do this. And it's kind of like, you don't have to agree with everything we say, but kind of just respect that this is our decision to put this together. We put this together out of our own time, And if you don't like it, you don't like it. You don't have to listen, but you don't have to kind of attack us for it, because we're just doing our own thing. And if you want to go to spend a decade doing what Mateus has done and learning fucking everything you can about seemingly everything in the world whenever I ask him a question, like, you go do that. Start your own podcast with some idiot from Yorkshire and see how far you get.
Yeah, I've had people comment on, like I've said almost the same thing, and had people comment about how what was it? They have their right to their opinion, and they have the freedom of expression and all this. Yeah, you do. You have the right to your opinion. Just keep it to your page.
Exactly.
Leave it off my page. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think
if you want to express it, go and express it on your own page. Why are you bothering me?
Well, that's it. And like, I do appreciate like freedom of speech and that whole, like, I absolutely do support that. But it's different when it's somebody's personal, when it's somebody's page that they've made. You have the right to run that how you want, and to let the people in there that you want to have in there. You don't owe anybody anything to allow everybody in there to say whatever they want. And if you don't like something that somebody posts, then fucking, you can delete it because it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my soapbox moment for the episode.
There you go. We're all getting a soapbox moment.
I don't like playing God, and like I said, with a lot of these people, because of the language barrier, because the language used on the site is primarily English, but the crowd on the site is primarily not.
Mm-hmm.
So English brings us all together, but often there can be misunderstandings, little jokes gone wrong, or somebody takes offense to a specific thing. So I usually try to give a lot of leeway. But yeah, it's blown up in my face a few times as well, because sometimes you just have to cut your losses.
I think you're the first.
That's also a real thing, though. I mean, we are dealing with a moment right now, especially when it comes to like Nordic culture stuff, Vikings and all that stuff. We are dealing with a moment where you see a lot of Americans feeling some kind of ownership over this. That's one of the things that I'm personally getting pissed off at when I see some of those comments on our podcast. Like, I'm from Scandinavia, raised in Scandinavia in the North Atlantic. I have taken a PhD in this history of Scandinavia and all of that stuff, right? And then somebody's like, oh, this is like a leftist view on the history. It's like, no, it's fucking not. This is actually stuff that I've learned from a bunch of other Scandinavians at a bunch of Scandinavian universities. Now shut the fuck up. Sorry. Yeah. But I mean, what I'm also loving about it though is that there are so many people who feel connected to this and who want to.
That's also it. A lot of people have lost their. Like not just with Scandinavian, but cultural all over the world. They've sort of lost touch with their cultures.
Exactly,
and that's why I think tattooing is becoming really big now, especially cultural tattooing.
Yeah.
And New Zealand with the Maoris, and Canada with the Native Americans, and the USA. People are looking for their culture again, and especially in North America, they've lost that, and if they suddenly they find this void that they're trying to fill, and if suddenly like somebody goes and tells them like they're 2% Viking, they're going to grab onto that and try to find something that speaks to them and makes them feel good about themselves, because they felt lost. They don't they don't have any background.
Yeah, and that's what I think is that's what makes it so important that we can share across the cultural boundaries, but we have to be aware of the sensitivities that come with that. We're we're sitting in these different cultures, and it can be really hard to communicate sometimes, even with cultures that we consider very similar to ours.
Yeah.
Like, it's even between the U.S. and Canada, there are cultural differences where sometimes you end up with miscommunicating. And throw in another language, maybe the person who's writing something or saying something isn't all that great at English, and then all of a sudden you have so many levels of miscommunication. And you also have to be forgiving at some point.
But it won't refer to a raven as a crow, because in their country they use the same word for both animals. And then somebody will go and shit on them because they called it a raven instead of a crow. It's like,
yeah. I mean, I actually did a little bit of
what he means.
Yeah, that's it. I think I did a little bit of thinking about this the other day, actually, because I used to be kind of like that. I used to get in these little heated arguments in these Facebook groups, and I actually think that part of it comes from, I guess, when people first start getting into this culture and kind of like learning about Norse mythology and the Viking Age. I think that a lot of people, when they find out these little bits of information, they want to use them at any possible opportunity, because it is such a complicated kind of world. They learn one little fact, and then that any opportunity is kind of like, I want to throw it in somebody's face because I know something. And I think the more, like, I've certainly learned, the more we've done this podcast and the more I've learned and the more I kind of get to know stuff, I'm kind of like, if someone says something wrong I don't really give a shit now. And I think that's kind of the case of, like, the more you learn, the less you care about those little things.
Exactly. You become more confident in yourself, so you don't have to attack others. Often people attack because they're insecure. Either insecure in their knowledge or insecure in themselves. So in order to feel as though they're, have knowledge or have power, they have to attack others and drag them down instead of going and like helping to build people up.
That's it. So, Matthias, talking of Facebook groups, I was on there this morning, kind of scrolling through Facebook, and I came across a post that I wanted to ask you about. I kind of just have a general discussion about, and it was to do with names in the Viking Age. And it was one person that was asking kind of advice on whether it was okay or not to name their child after a god. I mean, it's 2020, in my opinion, name your child whatever the fuck you want. But they were kind of like, is it acceptable? And so that was the first thing, is in kind of back in the Viking Age, was it common to name your child kind of after a god? Obviously, I know you had like Thor Bjornsson, which was more like a double version, but strictly, would you call your kid Odin? And then the second part to that was, there was a comment on there that mentioned a story about a farmer who named his children after the sun and the moon, and Odin came down and punished him for this, and this was why you can't name your kids after the gods. So it was just kind of like a discussion about that, and if there was anything to it, or whether there's anything in the history about that.
So so let's start with what kind of religion existed back in pre-Christian times in Scandinavia. It is a non-dogmatic community religion that's based on biosacral approach to the world. What does that mean? That means non-dogmatic. It doesn't have any texts that prescribe exactly how you should act in accordance with some law that the gods have ordained, at least presumably. Secondly, is community religion. It's grown organically from the community that exists in a given location, which means then that you should assume that there would be different rules and different perceptions depending on the community. So some community in Zealand, for instance, in the Viking Age, in the Danish area, they will have one perspective. Some community in the Swedish mountains will have another. Some community in the Norwegian fjords will have another, and so on and so on. That means that there's no standard orthodoxy. They don't necessarily share the same ideas. And the fact that it's considered a biosacral religion is that it's based on it basically applies some kind of religious ritual response to biological functions, and this would be, for instance, having a ritual to make sure that your harvest is going to go fine, and those kinds of things. This is an entirely different religion than those that we're familiar with in modern times nowadays, with a lot of theology and a lot of scholars and a lot of academics and priests and bishops and whatever else they've been, who have thought things about what God thinks about us and what we do, right? So therefore, saying one or the other, it strictly only applies to yourself. Like, if you think that you can't name your child after the gods, that's your choice and doesn't really apply to your neighbor. And I don't know if Scandinavians would have thought much about it when it comes down to it. Now, going on from there to the historical material, what we're seeing in the saga literature and also on runestones and a bunch of other inscriptions of various kinds from the Viking Age. Obviously, the sagas aren't from the Viking Age; they're much later, and they're from Iceland. So that's a particular community in and of itself, which would have its own history compared to Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. But what we see as sort of like a blanket statement is that people don't seem to carry names that are just Thor or Odin or something like that. People seem to carry names that are like Thorkell or Thorstein or Odhinkar and so on. So compound names where you have the god name and then some kind of attachment that means something in itself. So that could suggest, broadly, keeping what I just ranted about before in mind, that could suggest that there is a general tendency to not name your children exactly the same name as the god. And there can be multiple reasons for why. There can be taboo, there can be precautions, there can be a lot of other things. So it looks like they might not have applied these names to the people in general. You should also keep in mind that with several of the names of these gods, they describe functions. And that would be recognizable, for instance, in like the 900s. You would be able to see that Odin means the raging one or the ecstatic one or something like that, derived from the word Oder, right? So that is a function or a concept and the question is also then, would it make a lot of sense to name somebody after a function or a concept? But then again, I mean, we're talking about a culture that frequently named their kids Kettle. So I think Spoon is actually also in there somewhere. So, you never know. And
so that it's good to know that ridiculous names aren't just a modern construct, to be fair.
No, yeah,
But,
there are plenty of like weird names in the saga literature, especially.
That second part to the name, does that kind of have any meaning? Is it like to add strength to it, or is that do they just pick something they like and throw it on the end?
Well, you gotta wonder, what the hell does Thor Kettle mean? Thor's cauldron, Thor's pot. How does that make sense? Like I can't make sense of that. Like it's a name, and it's a name that's been in existence in Scandinavia for more than 1,000 years. Like there's still people named that today. It's just, yeah, like it's really hard to explain what that came from, why it was there. Thorstein, Thorstone. Could this be like a reference to like sacrificial stuff? Like and why? Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard to really say specifically why they would have named people that. And then
yeah, I mean, I would have imagined it would be like Thor and then axe, or Thor and then sword. Something strong and powerful. Not
there are
kettle
some
or
there
a
are some
spoon.
like kettle of food. Oscar. Good English name, Oscar. That means Ausgeir in Old Norse. God's spear.
There's an Oscar listening to this somewhere. They're
Yeah.
smiling ear to ear right now.
Yeah, lucky guy. See, I mean that probably we should probably interpret that as warrior, right? So God's spear, that's a warrior. I mean that's a pretty cool name, and you can find several of these kinds of names that are pretty cool and like typically mean warrior or something like that.
But it usually seems to be connected to something physical rather than the actual god itself. Like as far as Orstein goes, or even Thor Bjorn or something. It's not the actual god, but yeah, it's something else.
Yeah, no, and it's I mean, you can spend a lot of time researching the naming traditions in Scandinavia, from like the earliest rune inscriptions where we see names, or maybe just even words that could be names, like the first runic inscription that we have from Vimos in Denmark, in Fyn, from about 150 CE. It just says Harja, which means warrior. Could also be a male name though. Maybe it's on a comb, so maybe it belonged to a person named Warrior. Wagnio is also one we see a lot. That means wagon, and that is a name in the Viking Age, and it's also a name now. In modern Danish, it's Vagn. That just means wagon, and that's somebody's name out there. So yeah, I mean
it's quite fascinating. I mean, wonder if it's kind of like how if you create something, you name it after yourself. So maybe he was the son of the man who created the wagon.
maybe like
So like you get Smith and stuff.
Yeah,
it's definitely a fascinating topic.
Smith, Baker.
I mean,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I guess from my perspective, which is kind of very outsider, I guess using the word Thor in there, even if it's not just calling your child Thor, even having something after it's still a nod to the gods. It still kind of shows that it's not completely like wrong to use the gods' names in the name somewhere. So it's still, I feel like it's not a negative.
Yeah, but still at the time it might be confusing because everybody had the same gods at that time. Now you have religions and in every part of the world. So yeah, people are maybe more open to use the god because everybody in the community wouldn't be using that name for their god. Just like you get Jesus in Mexico is a really big one. Muhammad being a big name as well. But now, because nowadays you can do that because communities are mixed, and you wouldn't have the confusion going and naming your kid Loki that everybody automatically thinks of the god Loki.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, you would have that confusion, and like you said, you've got all the people. I mean, I wonder if they'd even just look at it kind of being a little bit pretentious. Like, they all, if you live in a small village and you all, honor the gods, and you out of all of them go, yeah, I'm calling my kid Odin. I wonder if the rest of them would look at you and go, kind of be like, what? You can't do that.
Actually, did you know? I'm pretty sure it was like one of the first like major bishops in Denmark. His name was Odinkar, so that presumably means Odin's man or something like that.
Okay.
So
okay,
there you go, a bishop.
Yeah, we named our son Loki. So
yeah, I mean, we spoke about that before. And you said you had a little bit of negativity from that over the years.
Yeah. No, it was just a couple times because this is before Marvel Comic, Union and all the Avengers films and shit. But yeah, we actually we wanted to name him we figured Loki, because that's like the Nordic Loke, but because it's spelt Loke, in English it would be confusing. It'd be Loke,
Yeah.
because in Scandinavian you pronounce the E, yeah, because you have extra vowels, so you don't need the long and short form, so you don't have the E going and making the former vowel long. So anyway, we were thinking of Loki because that's the Nordic way, and it is the Nordic god, so we should have it that way. But then in Denmark, they have a list of registered, approved names for children. And on this list, Loki is not approved name. And
Wow.
so then we figured, well, I'm not going to have the church go and tell me like what I can name my son. So he's going to be named Loki, whether you like it or not. So we had to go and file to go and get him registered as Loki with an I. And they had to go into the computer. Luckily, they have computers and stuff now, so they could go into the database and they could search. And they found an example in Iceland that it's actually spelt that way. So it was approved in Denmark now. So now he's actually the first Loki in Denmark.
Wow.
So you can't just name your child whatever you want. It has to be.
No.
Well, that doesn't make sense. Wow. I think this might be the
they were
one
afraid
time
somebody will name their kid Johnny Silver Guitar or something.
That's right. That one.
That seems absolutely insane that they wouldn't let you.
Well,
you can't just call your kid a pen if you want to call it a pen. Let's call it pen.
From a Scandinavian perspective, it actually seems pretty insane that you can just call your kid whatever, like here in America. Like I am so confused about American naming traditions. Sometimes I'm like, your first name,
not
just
just going and naming your kid something, but going and making a specific spelling of that name. Going and spelling Christopher with PH instead of two F's.
Yeah.
It's like
those ones sometimes wind me up a little bit where they've been changed just a little bit. But I mean, that's the beauty of people, though. Like you can have things different, and I find it so insane that you can't just name your kid whatever you want.
Well, so
yeah, but also in the States, I think it's sort of people wanting, sort of fighting for some sort of feeling of individuality and identity. So by going and having a name that nobody else has, then suddenly you have this identity that is totally your own. Rather than going and thinking about having the culture behind you and picking a name that has a history that's maybe been there for 1,000 years and getting your identity through that.
So there's a couple of things. I personally, I'm all for people doing whatever they want with naming. I mean, I advise caution on certain names and concepts of physical materials that you don't want to necessarily name your kids after. But that's that aside, Denmark and Iceland, as two countries in particular, are very, very strict on naming traditions, and you have to prove fuck ton of things to get a name registered in the proper way and so on. Yeah, and they would look like, and that's another thing. I think Norway is similar to an extent, but maybe a little more liberal. And they look to each other when it comes to a lot of these names. Like for instance, with Loki, they find it in the Icelandic database, then it's okay in Denmark too, right? And the same with like spellings of names. Like if you can prove that this is a sort of like traditional name or a traditional spelling or older spelling. Yeah, then it works out. Exactly. but there are some real problems, especially with the now cultures that are newer to the Scandinavian space. I have a friend, for instance, whose wife originally comes from a tribe in the Central African Republic, and they had a child, and they wanted to their son, he got a Danish first name, and then they wanted to give him a traditional name from her tribe as a middle name, and that was a huge hassle where they had to like go through a bunch of agencies and France and I don't know what to get the Danish government to accept that actually was a reasonable name.
So what happens if you just say no? Name it. I want to call my kid this. Like,
they're not going to put it on the birth certificate, man.
It has to be on the birth certificate. So if they don't have a certificate, then they don't get a citizenship card. Then then they're fucked.
That's just. I mean, you've told me a lot of things on this podcast, Matthias.
I think they actually have a backup name. Isn't it Christian or something? Or one of the former king or whatever. If you don't name your child, then it ends up getting the name of the former king or the former queen. Automatically.
My mind is blown.
Yeah.
No, I had to fight them. I had to fight the Danish government too a little bit on my son's name. His middle name is Ahtli. Which is also a perfectly Nordic name and everything, but they were like, oh, because this is still used in the Faroe Islands, it's okay in Denmark too. It's like, yeah, thanks, asshole. So,
I mean, I'm sat here in silence. One, this is blowing my mind, and two, I didn't know you had a son.
Oh, you didn't? Yeah, I did.
Let's just end the podcast here. I'm just so I don't know what else to say. I don't know what to say.
That was also a thing, because when we chose Loki, it wasn't like I said, it was pre-Marvel and all this, and it was more because we really like the idea of the Loki character, because you find so many kids in Denmark that are named Thor or Thorbjorn or Thorkild or whatever. They're Thor. But a lot of the mythos, all of the stories, like all the best stories, are all involving Loki, and absolutely. I think the church has twisted a lot of it, especially with Snorri and stuff, to making Loki into sort of a devil type of character when he actually wasn't. He was the trickster. He was the same as the Native American Raven character. He was the one the stories were based on, because he'd go and do something. Try to do something good, get in a bind somehow, and have to think his way out of it, and for the greater good of everybody. Like he was always trying to go and do something for the gods. It would end up getting fucked up, whether it was building a wall around or going and getting Thor's hammer made or whatever, and he'd end up going and getting fucked up and then having to figure his way out of it. And I figured, like, having that as a role model, somebody that tries to do something good, it doesn't work, and still having to go and like figure it out, is a better role model for somebody, for some kid, than just going and like getting angry and going and like smashing everyone with a hammer.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I mean, did you get, with him being the only one in Denmark, I imagine it's obviously not a common thing to call your son Loki. Did you get any kind of like pushback from other people using that name because they see it as almost calling your child Satan, I guess?
No, that's not. Yeah, there were a few that sort of had that. Oh yeah, you're going and naming your kid the devil, and there was one guy that went and said it was this was an online thing again, so they can get away with that shit.
Of course it was.
Going and saying it's the equivalent of going and naming your kid Hitler. And I'm just like, Hitler's a surname, of an actual person. It's not like the first name of a mythological character. Relax.
You just think some people just want to say like the most offensive thing they can. Like they don't even think what's coming out. It's just, I'm just going to say something.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, in Denmark, it's actually illegal to name your son Jesus, or Jesus for that matter. That's a thing you can't do. Yeah. Because Denmark doesn't really have separation of state and church. Just that's why that's the thing.
Wow. So I'm learning all sorts of things.
Oh yeah, you are. Yeah. No, it's actually in our constitution that there's no separation of state and church. That's in our constitution. It's part of it. So
I find that so insane, and I don't know whether you've if either of you seen there was a documentary. It was on Netflix for a little bit called Hail Satan, and it was about the Satanic Temple in America, and it wasn't necessarily that they were Satanists through and through, which they were a little bit, and they didn't believe in the devil. It was more that they didn't believe in like the union of state and church in America. So they went and lobbied when stones were put up on sort of government ground, like the Ten Commandment stones, and it was like, well, this shouldn't be on government ground. If you're having this, well, we want a statue of Baphomet here to even things out. It's like it shouldn't be that way. So it was more like an amazing troll of the government, but they seem to be kind of making a few waves over there and getting some things done in that, getting that separation between sort of government and church, which I think should be there. I don't think they should be the same thing.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
So that's definitely a good one to watch.
Yeah, no, I've seen that one. I love it. There are some great instances, But that's the thing. I mean, if you want to, put up a monument to the Ten Commandments, then you're also gonna have to have all the other religions represented in society right next to it. That's
it. Yeah. And but when you do that, this suddenly people get a little bit upset when you say that.
Yeah.
And to be fair, the Baphomet that they had done, the bronze statue, like it upset a few people. I thought it was a bloody good statue. It was really well made.
Yeah,
it was a nice. I thought it was a really beautiful piece of art. I mean, I don't know what that's saying about me.
Well,
so
by the way, we forgot to talk about that story that you asked me about.
Oh yeah, let's go back.
So
pull it back. The name, the farmer who apparently was punished for naming his children after the sun and moon.
Yeah, so this is story time, children. I'm going to read a couple of stories for you. There are two versions of that where basically, what happens is that somebody in the early part of the mythology in Snorri Sturluson's Edda ends up naming the god, the children after the night and day, and then that turns into something here. Okay, so first one is in chapter 10 of Snorri Sturluson's Gylfaginning. Snorri writes, Nörvi, or Narvi, was the name of a giant who lived in Giantland. He had a daughter called Night. She was black and dark in accordance with her ancestry. She was married to a person called Nalfari. Their son was called Öld. Next, she was married to someone called Annar. Their daughter was called Jöður. Her last husband was Delling, and he was of the family of the Aesir. Their son was Day. He was bright and beautiful in accordance with his father's nature. Then Allfather, presumably Odin, we do just a note on that. Allfather is an invention of Snorri Sturluson. There was actually no real Allfather in Viking times, but that's another story. Allfather took Night and her son, Day, and gave them 2 horses and 2 chariots and set them up in the sky so that they have to ride around the earth every 24 hours. Night rides in front on the horse called Hrimfaxi, and every morning he bedews the earth with the drips from his bit. Day's horse is called Skinfaxi, that means shining mane, and light is shed over all the sky and sea from his mane. And then comes the next one, the next story right after. And this is so what we have here is like one explanation for reckoning and time and all that stuff in a mythical context, and then the scene where we're getting these stories is the Swedish king named Gylfi. he's dressed up as a vagabond and calls himself Ganglari, and he has gone to the Aesir to ask them these questions because apparently you could do that back then. Now, then it goes. Then spoke Ganglari. How does he control the course of the sun and moon? And Hai said, there was a person whose name was Mundalferi, who had 2 children. They were so fair and beautiful that he called the one Moon and his daughter Sol, sun, and gave her in marriage to a person called Glen. But the gods got angry at this arrogance and took the brother and sister and set them up in the sky. They made Sol drive the horses that drew the chariot of the sun, which the gods had created to illuminate the worlds, out of the molten particle that had flown out of the world of Muspel. The names of these horses are Arvak and Ausin. Under the shoulders of the horse put 2 bellows to cool them, and in some sources it is called Iron Blast. Moon guides the course of the moon and controls its waxing and waning. He took 2 children from the earth called Bil and Huki as they were leaving a well called Birgir, carrying between them on their shoulders a tub called Saig. Their carrying pole was called Simul. Their father's name is Vidfin. These children go with Moon, as can be seen from Earth. So there you have it, a bunch of rambling about constellations in the stars. That is probably what we're dealing with here, especially with the last bit. That sounds like some weird mythological explanation for some kind of star constellation that you can see in association with the moon. But the first part are descriptions, and it looks like actually amalgamations of like 3 different myths that are very similar about the courses of the sun and the moon. And I think what you read on the internet was somebody who had mixed up the 2 first ones, where Allfather took night and her son day and put them up there, and then the second one where Mundilfari had called his son Moon and his daughter Sun.
Okay.
So that's what we're dealing with here, and it's not just Allfather; it's all the gods apparently that get angry at this arrogance, and then put them up there as punishment. So there you go.
There you go. Now all I have to do is just scroll through Facebook and find the post, link this podcast in there, and say just scroll through till about 1 hour 10 minutes in and listen.
Story time.
That's it. Yeah. To be fair, I find those stories about in kind of the mythology some of the most interesting, like how they explain everyday things that we have, like night and day and the stars. And I think it's so interesting because obviously they didn't know why they were there, how they were created, and the way that they come up with them is it's fascinating to me. What's the one with, does Thor throw something into the sky to make a star?
Yeah, that's the end of the story about how Skadi ends up with the gods. That one begins with the giant Thjazi, an eagle that is menacing the gods a little bit, at least, especially Loki. At the very end, they manage to kill him, and then Skadi, his daughter, shows up, and for some reason they're all afraid of getting their asses kicked by her. So they do multiple things to appease her. First of all, she gets to marry one of the gods. She wanted Balder, she got Njörður. Secondly,
is that the one with looking at the feet?
Yes, exactly. That's where she has to choose based on how nice their feet are. The second thing that she gets is the pleasure of seeing Loki tying his nuts to a goat, and then pulling back and forth.
Colin, definitely keep that one away from your son.
Yeah.
Oh, I have it. I was thinking of reading it to him soon. So
And
As long as
finally,
he doesn't try to recreate it.
do anything to get the other gods to laugh. Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
and then finally, they Thor, I think it is. It's not Odin. Yeah, it's Thor. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he takes Thjatsi's eyes and throw them into the sky,
Okay.
and they turn into stars. Now, it's for centuries at this point, Scandinavians have been trying to locate exactly which stars are Thjatsi's eyes, and I don't think anybody has come up with a good suggestion yet.
I'm sure many people have seen them.
Oh, absolutely.
Many people will have said they have. So do they have an explanation for what the North Star is? Because that's kind of the brightest one. Is that a thing, or is that not kind of pointed out?
So there's also I mean there's a couple of suggestions that the North Star is actually mentioned in Snøresetta. Anybody who's interested in this subject should see if they can get a hold of Gisli Sigurdsson's articles on this subject. He, an Icelandic scholar, he's written at least one English language article. He's written a whole book in Icelandic on this subject of like stars and constellations in Snorri Sturluson's Edda.
What I'll do is I'll put that in the little episode pack for
Yeah.
the Patreon supporters so they can find that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely one article that I believe is available on the internet out there for free, or for signing up with some kind of like academia.edu or something like that. But yeah, no, I don't remember that there's like a specific mentioning of the North Star. But there are definitely indications that they could be talking about the North Star in certain contexts. So,
yeah. Yeah. Let's wrap this one up. It was fun. Thank you very much, Colin. It was wonderful to. We planned this one for a while, so it was good to finally get you on.
Well, thank you for having me.
No problem. Do you want to just let people know where to find you? I know you're not the most tech savvy. Do you have Instagram?
Yeah, my girlfriend, she runs the Instagram, and it's what is it? Just Collindale Tattoo.
Okay. And then the Facebook group is
Traditional Nordic Tattoos.
That's one. So hopefully you'll get some people.
Yeah.
Coming.
And then there's also just my homepage, which is Skin and Bone.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, definitely go and look at some of.
DK.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely go and look at some of Colin's work. You have a style that kind of stands out. It stands out different to other people's. Particularly like the beast heads. You've kind of created your own almost of.
Yeah. Sort of my I was lucky to get into it sort of at the beginning. So yeah. Now a lot of people, like I said, when they Google, they're Googling tattoos, dragon tattoos, and then they fall across my dragon tattoos.
I bet you've seen so many reproductions, poor reproductions as well.
Yeah, some poor, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I say, you can tell that you only have to Google your work to be able to. It's a very distinctive sort of dragon style that you have, so you can tell your work. So I assume you can also tell when somebody's tried to copy it.
Yeah, it's sort of based off the Ernest style, but it has definitely my own aesthetics to it. I've always enjoyed the rune stones from Sweden, and just having the dragons that sort of are done onto an irregular surface, and much the same way that the body is a irregular surface. So they just form really well to be able to just twist them and turn them so that they follow the muscles and yeah.
When I
complement the body's form.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, when this whole thing's over and I get to finally come to Copenhagen, I'm gonna have to come and stop in and see you and get a little something.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
I'll have to do the same thing when they let me come back home once.
That's it.
I'm in the future.
I've got a long list of tattooists that keep coming on the show that I keep wanting to get some work by. So, Mateus, let people know where they can find you, find your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, of course, under my name, Mathias Nordvik. I should pop up. You can find the Nordic Mythology channel on Facebook. Just write in Nordic Mythology channel, and you can follow us there. I usually, when I remember it, post our links to our episodes here on the podcast. And yeah, also check out my website, NordicMythologyChannel.com, for all kinds of things, blog posts, and a little bit about me.
Perfect. You can find me at Daniel_Farrand1 or at Horns of Odin. And a couple of housekeeping things. You know, if you get a chance after listening to this, if you could just leave us a 5-star rating, a positive review, that would do really well. We can drown out the 2-star that we got for being too left, for being lefty. I'm still bitter about it. I told you I was bitter early in the episode.
I'm bitter about it. Well, it's like it's okay you don't like our podcast, but don't call me leftist just because you don't like our podcast. Like,
well, I think it was more that it was just saying that we had a leftist perspective on history, as if kind of like, and it's like, well, no, especially with you, I we've done a lot of episodes now, and you say things are the truth, whether it's going to upset people or not. But the one thing you do is you stick to what is the fact and the actual history.
I mean, everything is always, a matter of interpretations in different ways. But we mean, like scholars, we train to make qualified interpretations. We don't just like apply some political perspective. That's the biggest no-go. I mean, yeah, sure, you can always discuss whether or not people are, I don't know, impressed by the years of growing up in certain environments, and that gives them some kind of like tendency to direct their interpretations in some direction or whatever. But nobody here is making deliberate leftist interpretations of anything at all. Just keep that in mind.
It's always fun to go and like interesting to discuss politics and religion and all of this, but it's better from a historical standpoint than going and discussing it in modern terms and with modern emotions that run high sometimes.
Yeah.
Certainly do. I think yes. I personally, I think it's fun to listen to other people's perspective on things, and then you just kind of, if you agree with it, you agree with it. If you don't, you don't. But how do you ever learn anything if you only listen to everybody that thinks just like you?
Exactly, and I mean there are actual leftist interpretations of history, and they're usually something about like this Viking over here is hoarding the means of production and turning other people into wage slaves and la 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 la. That's what a leftist interpretation, at least a Marxist interpretation of history will begin with, right? It has nothing to do with allowing the conversation of the possibility that there might have been non-binary or trans or other genders or homosexuals in the Viking Age. Like that's not a leftist interpretation of anything. I mean, keep this in mind. Most communist countries that I'm familiar with have been very hostile to anybody else than heterosexuals. So that's also a thing historically. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Right. Let's wrap this one up finally. Well, you can tell we're quite bitter about it, but on the flip side of that, it shows that we care about what we do, and we don't necessarily want to always please everyone, but we try to be respectful to things.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing is just the Patreon account. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, please do. There is some great things on there. I mean, you get ad-free episodes, video episodes. There's 2 bonus episodes a month. But I think the best one, and it's the cheapest one on there as well, is that you get the episode pack for each episode we make. For the last episode, Sterler has sent me a load of links to articles that are going to go in there for that episode, and I'll put together one for this episode as well with the things we've spoken about and where you can find them. And people seem to be finding a lot of value in that. So yeah, just check out Patreon/Nordic Mythology Podcast, and hopefully you can get some value out of that. So yeah, perfect. Thank you again, Colin. It's been great.
Thank you.
And you're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, it just flew by. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I know you look comfortable there. Right. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, you too.
Bye.